From Palestine to Morocco and Germany to the United States, nations from across the world were each given their 3 minutes in the spotlight to share what they were willing to commit to here in Durban. Small island nations like Suriname and Nauru have said that the consequences of climate change will completely wipe out their countries in years to come. Developing countries like Nigeria and South Africa say developed nations must responsibly commit to the second period of the Kyoto Protocol. But industrialized countries like Sweden and the United States say developing nations must now share part of the responsibility. United Nations Special Envoy for Climate Change, Todd Stern, was met with some opposition from a young American woman who stood up at the start of his presentation. She passionately cried out for a fair and binding climate treaty.
We need an urgent path to a fair, efficient, and legally binding treaty. You must take responsibility to act now.
Thank you. Can we listen to the speech? Nobody is listening to you.
I'm delighted that I have such an enthusiastic crowd. This is great. And just as we have done over the past 2 years, we must move on all these issues together as a balanced package. And indeed, that is the only basis on which they can move forward. As we embark on the final hours of negotiations, I want to urge all countries to seek common ground to deliver a pragmatic and successful outcome.
Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change in Greece, George Papakonstantinou, drew parallels between the financial crisis in Greece and the devastating consequences of not acting now. He says as Greece squandered its resources, so too will the citizens of the world if a legally binding climate change solution is not agreed upon this week.
We in Greece borrowed beyond our capacity to service our debts, and we globally continue to emit at rates that are clearly beyond the capacity the Earth's environment can deal with. We in Greece did not have a system in place to provide a clear picture of the economic parameters until it was too late. Globally, we still do not have a robust global MRV system in place to track emissions. We reacted with measures that proved insufficient to convince that we're addressing the crux of our financial problem. And globally, we put forth pledges that, by everybody's estimation, are inadequate.
Brazilian Environment Minister Isabel Teixeira spoke of minding the gap, the space between the end of the first commitment period over the next year and the start of a second phase. Teixeira highlighted Brazil's goal of reducing deforestation by 80% by 2020. She says many developing nations are already playing their part in adaptation and mitigation strategies.
The parties have agreed to define further commitments for parties included in Annex 1 for the period beyond 2012, in time to ensure that there is no gap between the first and second commitment periods of the Kyoto Protocol. Durban is our last opportunity to avoid this gap. We must adopt the second commitment period by the end of this week. We are determined to keep up the implementation of our actions in the context of sustainable development and the fight against poverty.
And the United Kingdom's Secretary of State of Energy and Climate Change, Chris Huhne, says while the United Kingdom remains fully committed to the Kyoto Protocol, it leaves a massive amount of greenhouse gas emissions unaccounted for.
For millions of Africans, climate change is not a matter of negotiating texts, informal informals or square brackets. It's a matter literally of life and death. The UK remains fully committed to the Kyoto Protocol. We are proud of the protocol. A second commitment period covering only the EU and 2 or 3 other developed countries with binding commitments would control less than 15% of global emissions. Some 85% of global emissions would remain uncontrolled. That would not provide the certainty that investors need.
The Kyoto Protocol limits the space of developed nations to pollute. But these countries, most notably the United States, say some developing nations are progressing at such a rapid rate that they are among some of the highest emitters in the world. The future of the Kyoto Protocol post-2012 continues to hang in the balance. Minoshni Pillay, SABC News, Durban.